Right now, there's $120 billion sitting on an abandoned wallet. They haven't moved in 13 years, and anyone who tried to find out who they belong to either disappeared or suddenly lost interest. My name is Mr. Dark Web, and I know why Satoshi Nakamoto had to disappear. I've been gathering information about one of the most enigmatic figures of the digital age. The man who created the technology that revolutionized money and vanished into thin air, leaving behind a code that changed the world and a fortune that no one dares touch. This story started for me in February of 2024. I was looking through the old archives of the Bitcoin Talk forum when I came across a strange detail. In one of the posts from 2010 years ago, a user called Old Miner mentioned that he had received a private message from Satoshi warning him not to mine too many coins. The post itself was edited 7 times, and each time details were removed from it. The last edit was dated April 2011, 2 days before Satoshi disappeared. I started digging deeper. I contacted people who remembered those times. Most of them refused to talk, but those who did say the same thing. Satoshi had been acting strangely in the last weeks before he disappeared. He'd become more paranoid, started erasing traces, handing over authority, like he was preparing for something inevitable. There are legends on the Darknet about a closed forum called Crypto Ghosts, where those who knew Satoshi personally supposedly gather. I managed to get an invitation through someone whose name I can't give. What I found there made me look at the history of Bitcoin in a new way. Correspondence archives, technical documents that are not publicly available, and most importantly, a chronology of events that does not coincide with the official version. But before we dive into these materials, we need to understand the context. The year is 2008. The world is on the verge of the greatest financial collapse since the Great Depression. Banks are falling one by one. Governments are printing trillions to save a system that is rotten to the core. And just at that moment, a 9-page document appears out of nowhere, signed by a name that doesn't exist, Satoshi Nakamoto. Even the name itself is a mystery. Translated from Japanese, it means clear thinking within the foundation, or central intelligence. But all evidence points to the fact that Bitcoin's creator had nothing to do with Japan. The British spelling in the code and messages, the time of activity corresponding to the London time zone, the academic writing style. Everything said that behind the pseudonym was someone else entirely. Over the years of investigating, I've seen many theories about who Satoshi is, from the insane to the frighteningly plausible. But the real story has proven to be more complicated than any of them. It's not just a story about the creation of cryptocurrency. It's a story about a genius who realized he was creating a weapon that could bring down the world's financial system. And he disappeared at the very moment when his creation began to attract interest from those who should not have known about it. On the 18th of August 2008, someone registered the bitcoin.org domain through an anonymous service in Panama. The payment went through several proxy wallets, with the trail getting lost in a Japanese payment system. At the same time, Lehman Brothers was 4 weeks away from a collapse that would take the entire world economy with it. But the story began a little earlier. On the 22nd of August, a letter from an unknown sender arrived at the post office of Wei Dai, a famous cypherpunk. It was signed with Satoshi Nakamoto's name. The message stated that he was working on an electronic money system that did not require a trusted third party. Wei Dai later admitted that at first he thought it was just another naive enthusiast project. He received dozens of such emails, but something in the technical description made him respond. On the CryptoGhost forum, I found a screenshot of that very correspondence. The details that Satoshi described to Wei were not included in the final version of the white paper. He mentioned the need to create a system that would survive not just an economic crisis, but attempts by governments to destroy it. In one of the letters, there was a phrase that was carefully scrubbed from all the archives. It was that the system should have a period of quiet growth until it became too big to stop. On the 31st of October 2008, the crypto mailing list Metzdout received a letter that would change the world. A 9-page white paper titled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. The white paper was impeccably written. Academic style, precise structure, elegant solutions to the most complex problems that cryptographers have been working on for decades. But the most interesting thing was in the details. The analysis of the metadata of the PDF file, which was carried out by experts in 2014, showed a strange thing. The document had been created in OpenOffice version 2.4, which at that time was used mainly in academic circles in the UK. The timestamp of the file's creation indicated the second half of the day at Greenwich Mean Time. The Bitcoin Talk forum archives contained the first reactions to the white paper. Most cryptographers were skeptical. Hal Finney, a legend of the crypto-punk movement, wrote that the idea was interesting, but hardly viable. Nick Szabo didn't react at all, although it later emerged that he had scrutinized the document. An interesting detail: the IP addresses from which Satoshi answered the first questions were constantly changing, but they all went through the Tor network. Satoshi methodically answered each objection. His answers gave the appearance of a man who had thought out the system down to the smallest detail. He didn't improvise. He knew the answers in advance. In one of his messages, he mentioned that he had been working on the code for a year and a half. That meant that the project had begun in the spring of 2007 year, when no one had suspected the impending crisis. Or did he suspect it? On the Crypto Ghosts forum, an old-timer under the nickname Ghost Trader claimed to have seen warnings of the impending collapse of the mortgage market in closed financial chat rooms in 2007. The same terms and language would later appear in Satoshi's comments about the traditional banking system. By December 2008, the world was on fire. Banks were falling like dominoes. Governments were printing money at an unprecedented rate. And that's when Satoshi announced that the code was ready. On the 3rd of January, 2009, while the world was celebrating the new year and hoping for the best, the first block of the new financial system appeared online. But there was one detail that was only noticed years later. A few days before Bitcoin's launch, all traces of Satoshi's preparatory work were thoroughly cleaned up. Drafts of code, test transactions, correspondence with early adherents, everything disappeared. It was as if someone had warned him that he would be hunted from the moment of launch. On the 3rd of January 2009, at 18 hours 15 minutes 5 seconds GMT, block number 0 was born, Genesis block. But what Satoshi had sewn into it turned a technical launch into a political manifesto. Hidden in the code of the first block was a text line: Chancellor of the Exchequer is ready to give banks a second state aid package. The headline was from the British newspaper The Times. It wasn't just a date proof. It was a declaration of war. It took me a long time to realize one strange thing. Why this particular newspaper? Why this particular headline? In the Crypto Ghosts archives, I found an answer that turned Satoshi's motives upside down. A user under the nickname Time Traveler claimed that the original version of the code had a different headline from the Financial Times, more harsh and accusatory. But hours before the launch, Satoshi replaced it with a more neutral one. It was as if someone had advised him not to be too radical. The first 50 bitcoins created in the Genesis block have a feature. They cannot be spent. It's not a bug, but a specially built-in feature. Satoshi sacrificed the first coins to prove he's not in it for the money. There was a legend in the closed chats of early miners that these 50 bitcoins were a kind of seal. If they ever came into circulation, it would mean that Satoshi was back. On the 9th of January 2009, block number 1 was mined. The 6 days between the first and second block is another mystery. With the power of the network at the time, the block should have appeared in 10 minutes. What was Satoshi doing for those 6 days? The official story is that he was testing the system, but analysis of the blockchain shows something else. On the Crypto Ghost forum, I found a post from someone calling himself Genesis Witness. He claimed that during those 6 days, Satoshi was creating a safety net, a series of transactions that could be activated in the event of an attack on the young system. Traces of these transactions are allegedly still visible in certain early blockchain patterns, but only if you know what to look for. On the 12th of January, the first transaction in Bitcoin's history took place. Satoshi sent 10 coins to Hal Finney, a cryptographer, and one of the few people who believed in the project from the beginning. Finney later recounted that Satoshi asked him to run the node and help with testing, but there was a detail that Finney only mentioned in private correspondence that surfaced online after his death. Satoshi warned him not to publicize his involvement or draw attention to the project early. In the first weeks, Satoshi mined almost single-handedly. The power of his equipment was staggering. He controlled about 90% of the network. Calculations show that he had at least 50 computers working around the clock. For the year 2009, this meant a serious investment, at least $100,000 just for the equipment. Where does an anonymous programmer get that kind of money? In the documents I found on Crypto Ghosts, there's a theory. A few months before Bitcoin was launched, someone made a series of bets against the banking sector in the derivatives market. The winnings totaled about $3 million. The funds were withdrawn through an offshore network and disappeared. The timestamps of these transactions strangely coincide with Satoshi's periods of inactivity in the forums. By February of the year 2009, several more people had joined mining. Satoshi personally wrote to each of them, explaining how to set up the software. But there was a strange pattern. He always advised to mine in moderation, not to be greedy. In one of his emails, a screenshot of which has been preserved in the archives, he wrote a phrase that gives me goosebumps. He said that those who mined too much in the beginning would regret it later when someone came after them. By March 2009, Bitcoin had already been operating for 2 months. The system was stable, and the number of participants was slowly growing. And it was then that an event occurred that people prefer not to remember. Someone tried to conduct a 51% attack to seize control of the network. The attack failed, but not because of technical defenses. The attacker simply stopped. The logs that were recovered show that the attacker abruptly stopped the attack and never appeared on the Bitcoin network again. A week after the incident, Satoshi changed his behavior pattern. He became even more cautious, started using additional levels of encryption, and changed his activity times. It was as if he realized that he was already being watched by those he had feared from the beginning. Everyone leaves traces, even the one who desperately tries to hide them. In 2 years of activity, Satoshi Nakamoto wrote about 80,000 words in forums, emails, and code comments, enough to create a digital portrait of him. The first thing that caught the researcher's eye was British English. Satoshi wrote color instead of color, optimize instead of optimize, bloody hard instead of damn hard. But there was one oddity which was noticed by an Oxford linguist who analyzed the texts in 2014. Sometimes, about 3% of the time, Americanisms slip through. It was as if the author had learnt to write in the British style on purpose, but sometimes forgot. On the CryptoGhost forum, I found a more in-depth analysis. User Linguistanon conducted a stylometric analysis of all Satoshi's texts and found a striking thing. The writing style varied depending on the topic. When Satoshi wrote about cryptography, he used short, chopped phrases. When he explained economic aspects, he used long, complex sentences with many adjectives. It was as if two different people were writing, but the most interesting thing was the activity patterns. Satoshi was almost never online between 5 in the morning and 11 in the afternoon GMT. This corresponded to nighttime on the east coast of the United States, or a working day in Europe. Analyzing 742 timestamps showed a clear pattern. Activity peaked at weekends, especially Saturday night UK time. Satoshi also left traces in the code. The comments in the source code revealed a man with an academic background. He used terms from scientific articles of the 70s and 80s, referring to little-known works on game theory. In one place of the code, there was a comment with a reference to an article of 1,983 years old about a Byzantine problem, which could be found only in the archives of 3 British universities. Another detail discovered on CryptoGhost is that Satoshi never made a typo, not a single one in 2 years. This is statistically improbable for such a large amount of text. Either he used an automatic checker and carefully proofread every post, or the texts went through an editor. In April of the year 2010, an incident occurred that revealed a lot about Satoshi's personality. A developer suggested adding a feature to Bitcoin that would allow it to track large transactions. Satoshi reacted unusually harshly. His response, which was later edited, included the phrase that the whole point of Bitcoin was to ensure that no one, especially governments, could control the flow of money. The original version of the post survived only in the search engine's cache and was deleted a few hours later. Satoshi was clearly interested in gold and the history of money. In his posts, there were references to the gold standard, the Bretton Woods system, even the ancient Roman denarii. In one of his posts, he mentioned that he had studied the reasons for the collapse of all known currencies over the last 500 years. Such knowledge gave away either an economist, a historian, or a man obsessed with the idea of creating an invulnerable monetary system. Analyzing the emotional coloring of the texts revealed another oddity. Satoshi became more tense with each passing month. If in 2009 his messages were full of enthusiasm, by 2010 there were notes of paranoia. He began to avoid personal questions, stopped joking, and became more formal. In December 2010, WikiLeaks announced that it was ready to accept donations in bitcoins. Satoshi's reaction was panic, barely concealed behind restrained language. He begged WikiLeaks not to do this, saying that the project was not yet ready for such attention. One message, which he deleted 5 minutes after posting, included the phrase, "You don't realize what you're doing. They're coming for all of us." Satoshi's last few weeks of activity had been strange. He started to delegate to other developers, but he did it chaotically, as if he was in a hurry. Removed his name from the copyright on the official website. Handed over the cryptographic keys to the alert system. And most importantly, he began to erase traces of his presence on the internet. CryptoGhost has a screenshot taken on the 23rd of April 2011 Satoshi's last message in private chat is, "They're too close now. I need to disappear. Don't look for me." 3 hours after this message, all of Satoshi Nakamoto's accounts were silenced forever. On the 20th of April, 2011, Gavin Andresen, the main Bitcoin developer after Satoshi, made an announcement that changed everything. He was going to give a presentation about Bitcoin at the CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. The meeting was scheduled for June. The CryptoGhosts archives have preserved correspondence that began immediately after this announcement. Satoshi wrote Gavin just one sentence: "I thought you understood why this is a bad idea." Gavin replied that he wanted to legitimize Bitcoin, to show that it is not a tool for criminals. Satoshi didn't respond again. Not at all. Never. But there was a detail that only a few people in the inner circle knew. 3 days before Gavin's announcement, someone tried to gain access to the server where Bitcoin source code was stored. The attack was repelled, but the attacker's IP address led to a government address range in Maryland, 20 kilometers from NSA headquarters. On the 23rd of April, Satoshi sent his last known letter to Mike Hearn, one of the developers. It contained a phrase that has been quoted thousands of times since. "I've moved on to other things. Bitcoin is in good hands with Gavin and all of you." But there was a second part to the letter, which Hearn didn't reveal until 2016. Satoshi wrote, "Don't turn me into a mysterious figure. It will only hurt the project." On the same day, the 23rd of April, several strange events took place. The bitcoin.org domain was re-registered to another person. All backups of early versions of the code disappeared from several servers at the same time. Most importantly, someone tried to withdraw bitcoins from one of Satoshi's early addresses. The transaction failed, but the very fact of the attempt meant that someone had partial access to his keys. The CryptoGhosts forum has a post from a person claiming to have worked for one of the domain registrar companies at the time. According to him, the request to change bitcoin.org data came with documents that are usually provided by law enforcement agencies during investigations. The company complied with the request without question. On the 26th of April 2011, Satoshi Nakamoto disappeared for good. But the disappearance was strange. Usually when people disappear from the internet, traces are left behind. Inactive accounts, old posts, digital rubbish. In Satoshi's case, everything had been cleaned out. It was as if someone had gone over the internet with a digital eraser. A month after Satoshi's disappearance, documents from a European intelligence agency were leaked. The documents mentioned Operation Digital Gold, which was aimed at identifying the creators of anonymous payment systems. Bitcoin was on the list of priority targets. The start date of the operation was the 15th of April, 2011. Gavin Andresen spoke at the CIA after all. The meeting went well, he said, and the agency showed a healthy interest in the technology. But there was one oddity. After he returned, Gavin changed. He stopped talking about Satoshi, avoided questions about him, and in 2016 he said he thought Craig Wright was the real Satoshi, a statement so absurd that many thought Gavin had been forced to say it. In July 2011, 3 months after Satoshi's disappearance, the first major Bitcoin theft occurred. A hacker stole 25,000 coins from the Mt. Gox exchange. But the strange thing was that the stolen coins were sent to addresses that belonged to Satoshi. More specifically, to addresses that Satoshi had been mining from in the year 2009. It was like someone was trying to lure him out of hiding. On CryptoGhosts, there is a theory that Satoshi did not just disappear. he was forced to fake his own digital death. As proof, they cite a fact. A week before his disappearance, someone bought 3 passports of Caribbean countries through shell companies. The documents were issued to people with the initials SN. All 3 were men in their 40s, with higher education in computer science. But the creepiest thing I found was in a private section of the forum, a screenshot of a message sent from Satoshi's account 6 months after his disappearance. Just 3 words, "They found me." The message was deleted after 30 seconds, but one person managed to take a screenshot. The sender's IP address led to Eastern Europe, but it could have been a VPN. 13 years have passed since then. Satoshi's accounts are silent. His bitcoins haven't moved. But anyone who has tried to seriously investigate his disappearance has sooner or later received a warning. Sometimes polite, sometimes not so polite. Satoshi Nakamoto's story has become a taboo that everyone knows about, but prefers to keep quiet. In the 13 years of the search for Satoshi Nakamoto, dozens of journalists, hackers, and cryptanalysts have spent thousands of hours trying to solve the biggest mystery of the digital age. Some have come too close to solving it. Others have fallen victim to their own ambitions. The most high-profile hunt began in December of 2015. Wired and Gizmodo magazines simultaneously published investigations pointing to Australian scientist Craig Wright. The evidence looked convincing. Leaked documents, emails, blog posts. A few hours after publication, the Australian Tax Office searched Wright's home. Coincidence? The folks at CryptoGhost think otherwise. Craig Wright was the perfect candidate. Multiple degrees, publications in cryptography, enough wealth to buy 50 computers in 2009. But the devil was in the details. The contract between Wright and his late partner Dave Clayman mentioned a trust for 1,100,000 bitcoins. The PGP keys in the document were dated 2008. It's perfect. Too perfect. Cryptographers were quick to spot the forgery. PGP keys were created retroactively in the year 2014. Wright's blog posts about Bitcoin turned out to be edited after the fact. But what's most revealing is the stylometric analysis. Wright's writing style was radically different from Satoshi's. Where Satoshi was succinct, Wright is verbose. Where Satoshi was modest, Wright was narcissistic. In May of 2016, Wright arranged a proof for several journalists and Gavin Anderson. He signed a message with a key from an early Bitcoin blockchain. Gavin believed it. But when experts demanded public proof, Wright cited emotional pressure and refused. In the crypto community, he was nicknamed Fiktoshi. The best part came later. Dave Clayman's family sued Wright, accusing him of stealing his partner's bitcoins. During the trial, startling details surfaced. Wright claimed that he couldn't access the bitcoins until 2020 because of some sort of cryptographic time lock. When the deadline approached, the bitcoins never moved. In March 2024, a British court officially ruled, Craig Wright is not Satoshi Nakamoto, and his documents are forgeries. But there was a detail that few noticed. During the trial, Wright said that the real Satoshi would never reveal himself because that would mean his death. When the judge asked for clarification, Wright fell silent and never returned to the subject. Another serious candidate is Nick Szabo, the creator of the BitGold concept. Linguistic analysis showed striking similarities in writing style. Both used double spaces after dots, rare technical terms, and similar turns of speech. Szabo wrote about the problem of trusted third parties months before Bitcoin's emergence. After Bitcoin's launch, he was strangely silent about his BitGold project. On Crypto Ghosts, a man was found who claimed to have attended a closed conference of cryptographers in 2008 year. According to him, Sabo presented a concept strikingly similar to Bitcoin, but under a different name. When someone asked about practical implementation, Sabo said that the time has not yet come. Not yet. But Sabo's theory has gaps. He is an active Twitter user, a public figure, the exact opposite of the paranoid Satoshi. Plus, Satoshi didn't know about BitGold before he was told about it after the white paper was published. It's weird not knowing about the work of the person you claim to be. Hal Finney, the first person after Satoshi to launch the Bitcoin node, was also under suspicion. He lived a few blocks away from Dorian Nakamoto, the man with the real name Satoshi Nakamoto, who journalists mistook for the creator of Bitcoin. Coincidence? Finney died in 2014 of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, taking all the secrets with him. He froze his body in a cryo chamber before he died, hoping to be resurrected in the future. His cryptographic keys were frozen along with his body. The creepiest theory I found in the CryptoGhosts archives concerns Len Sassaman, a cryptographer and privacy activist. He committed suicide in July 2011, 2 months after Satoshi disappeared. Sassaman worked on anonymous payment systems, lived in Europe, and his time of activism coincided with Satoshi's patterns. In his suicide note, he wrote a cryptic phrase about unfinished work that must now be finished by others. But all these investigations hit the same wall. As soon as the hunters get too close to a clue, strange things start happening. Documents go missing, servers go down, sources suddenly go silent. One journalist told me that after publishing an investigation about Satoshi, men in suits came to his house and politely asked him to switch to other topics. In 2019, a group of hackers claimed to have hacked into an old mailbox, possibly belonging to Satoshi. They promised to publish the contents for a ransom of 100 bitcoins. The money was collected in 12 hours. But the publication never happened. The hackers disappeared, the site was deleted, and the money was returned to the senders. It was as if someone very powerful decided that the world didn't need to know the truth. On the 8th of September 2014, the crypto community woke up to news that made everyone freeze. The mailbox SatoshiVistomail.com, which had been silent for 3 years, suddenly came to life. The message was short: "I am not Dorian Nakamoto." 4 words that set off a chain of events that revealed more than anyone expected. 6 months earlier, Newsweek magazine published a sensational investigation. Journalist Leah Goodman claimed to have found the real Satoshi, Japanese-American engineer Dorian Prentice Satoshi Nakamoto from California. The poor man instantly became the victim of media hysteria. Journalists besieged his house, chased him in the streets. Dorian denied involvement in Bitcoin, but no one believed him. And now, after 6 months of silence, someone has decided to defend an innocent man. But who? The hacker who broke into the mail? Satoshi himself coming out of the shadows? Or a third person who had access all along? On the CryptoGhosts forum, I found a post from someone calling himself Mail Cracker. He claimed to be the hacker. According to him, the hack was ridiculously simple. Password recovery via a secret question. The answer was found in Satoshi's early posts on the P2P Foundation forum, but then things got weird. After sending the message about Dorian, the hacker tried to examine the contents of the mailbox. Most of the emails had been deleted back in 2011, but there was one unsent message in the drafts, dated 25th April 2011, the day after Satoshi's official disappearance. The text was encrypted, but the headline was clear: Insurance. Mailcracker claimed to have spent weeks trying to decrypt the message. When he succeeded, the content shocked him so much that he immediately removed all traces of the hack and disappeared from the network. Before leaving, he left only one phrase. The message contained private keys to wallets containing 700,000 bitcoins and instructions on what to do if something happened to the author. 2 days after the hack, the inexplicable happened. Several early Bitcoin addresses, inactive since 2010, suddenly showed microtransactions, 1 Satoshi each. The community exploded with theories. Is this Satoshi showing that he's alive? A warning? Or is someone testing stolen keys? A pattern could be seen on the Blockchain Explorer. The addresses to which the Satoshis were sent formed a sequence. When someone figured out how to convert them to ASCII code, the message was, "Not your keys, not your coins." A classic cryptocurrency mantra about the importance of controlling private keys. But why now? Crypto Ghost's archives include a screenshot from the Black Market Reloaded Darknet forum. 3 days before the hack, there was an advert for the sale of information about the identity of Satoshi Nakamoto. The price was 10,000 bitcoins. The ad ran for 6 hours and disappeared, but one user managed to contact the seller. According to him, the seller provided evidence, a photo of a passport with smudged data, except for the initials SN, and a fragment of Bitcoin code with comments, which are not in the public version. After the email hack, there was a real panic among early Bitcoin investors. If a hacker got access to Satoshi's keys, he could crash the market by selling 1,200,000 bitcoins. The price dropped 30% in 24 hours. But Satoshi's coins didn't move. Not a single one. A week after the hack, all Satoshi-related domains and mailboxes were put under enhanced protection. Someone paid for the premium protection 10 years in advance, using bitcoins from a 2011-year-old wallet. The transaction was traced to an address that was last active the day before Satoshi disappeared. The strangest thing happened to Mailcracker itself. After he disappeared from the network, several people tried to find him. The trail led to Eastern Europe, then to Asia, and then broke off. A month later, a post from his account appeared on a forum. "Forget about Satoshi. Some secrets must remain secrets. I realized this too late." In December 2014, an unnamed European bank was leaked. The documents referred to an account opened in April 2011 in the name of SN Technologies. The account contained 300 million euros converted from bitcoins at the exchange rate of the time. The account was frozen at the request of Interpol, but the money was never recovered. After the events of 2014, the hunt for Satoshi took a new turn. Now everyone realized that whoever was hiding behind that name hadn't just disappeared. He had prepared a multi-layered system of defenses, safeguards, and traps for those who would come too close. And most importantly, he or those protecting him were still monitoring the situation. 1,200,000 bitcoins, $120 billion at current exchange rates, 5% of all bitcoins that will ever exist. They've been sitting at 50,000 addresses, untouched since 2010. It's not just wealth, it's a doomsday weapon for the crypto market. Blockchain analysts spent years mapping these addresses. The mining pattern was unique. Satoshi mined methodically, almost mechanically. Each block was exactly 50 bitcoins. No pooling, no spending. It was like a robot programmed to accumulate. But there was one anomaly that was only noticed in 2018. Every 10,000th block Satoshi didn't touch. He skipped it. It couldn't be a coincidence. The probability of such a coincidence tends to zero. There's a theory on crypto ghosts. These blocks are markers left for someone who knows what to look for. Perhaps for himself. Perhaps for a successor. In 2017, when Bitcoin reached $20,000, Satoshi's fortune was estimated at $20 billion. He would have been among the top 50 richest people in the world. Analysts at Goldman Sachs released a secret report that hit the web. It said that if Satoshi's coin started to move, it would cause a panic that could collapse not only the crypto market, but also the traditional financial markets that were already closely linked to it. But there's an even more frightening theory. What if Satoshi mined those coins knowing he would never spend them? What if it was a sacrifice, taking 5% of the issue to create a deficit? There are hints in his early posts. He wrote about the need for the right balance and long-term sustainability. Perhaps 1,200,000 bitcoins is not wealth, but the foundation on which the whole system rests. On the CryptoGhost forum, I found a post from a quantum cryptographer. He analyzed Satoshi addresses and found something disturbing. The private keys to these addresses were not randomly generated. They contain a mathematical pattern that will become vulnerable when sufficiently powerful quantum computers become available. He estimated that this would happen between 2030 and 2035. This means that Satoshi coins have an expiry date, a timer ticking in the opposite direction. Either they will be spent before the quantum era arrives, or they will fall prey to the first person to gain access to a quantum computer of sufficient power. And Satoshi should have known that. He's too smart not to foresee the advancement of technology. In the year 2020, there was an incident that few people know about. A large mining farm in China discovered a block with an anomaly. It contained a hidden transaction not visible to normal explorers. The transaction moved 0 bitcoins from one Satoshi address to another. A technically meaningless transaction, but encoded in the metadata was a message. Soon, Chinese authorities confiscated the farm's equipment and closed it down. The official reason was violation of energy quotas, but insiders say the real reason was panic in the government. If Satoshi is alive and preparing to return, it could mean the end of the state monopoly on money. There's another detail I found in the archives. In the year 2009, Satoshi wrote a strange comment in code. In 21 years, everything will fall into place. 21 is a sacred number for Bitcoin. 21 million coins. 2009 plus 21 equals 2030 years. A coincidence with the prediction about quantum computers? Or did Satoshi build something more into the system? The craziest theory I've heard from an old-timer with crypto ghosts goes like this. Satoshi coins are not just bitcoins. There's a message encrypted in their arrangement on the blockchain, or an instruction, or the key to something bigger. You just have to know how to read it. Several groups of cryptographers have independently tried to decipher the pattern. They all stopped at about the same stage, refused to explain why. In April of 2024, the event that led me to start this investigation occurred. A transaction appeared on the blockchain from an address that had been silent since 2010. Not Satoshi, but close. The address belonged to someone in the first 10 miners. The transaction had a message. He never left. He's waiting. You'll know the truth soon. I spent months trying to trace the sender. I failed. I started this investigation with a simple question: who is Satoshi Nakamoto? But as this investigation progressed, I realized that was the wrong question. The right question is, why did Satoshi Nakamoto have to disappear? The answer lies on the surface, hidden in plain sight. Bitcoin is not just electronic money. It is a virus launched into the global financial system. A virus that cannot be stopped as long as the internet exists. And Satoshi knew that once those in power realized the true nature of his creation, they would come after him. Not to reward him, to force him to destroy what he had created, or to control it. But Satoshi was smarter than that. He didn't just disappear, he became a myth, a legend, an idea that couldn't be arrested or killed. In the meantime, $120 billion continues to lie untouched. A digital monument to the man who gave the world financial freedom and disappeared to protect it. Every day, these sleeping coins are a reminder that some things are more valuable than money, that true power lies in the ability to give it up, that the most powerful man in the world is the one who can't be found. My investigation is coming to an end, not because I've learned everything, it's because I've learned enough. As always, you're Mr. Dark Web. The first transaction in Bitcoin history has been sent to a man who now lies frozen in a cryo chamber. 10 BTC. Sender, Satoshi Nakamoto. My name is Mr. Dark Web, and today I'm going to show you why the recipient and sender can be the same person, and why this transaction could be the key to the biggest mystery of cryptocurrencies in general. I recently told you about the $120 billion locked up in Satoshi Nakamoto's wallets, about how the creator of Bitcoin disappeared, leaving behind only a pseudonym and a revolutionary technology. But today's story may shed light on the identity of the father of cryptocurrencies. There is one fact about the creator of Bitcoin that everyone knows, but that almost no one thinks about. In Scottsdale, Arizona, in the Alcor Life Extension Foundation building, the body of the man who was the first Bitcoin user in history, after Satoshi, is stored at minus 196 degrees centigrade. Cryogenic chamber, 128. Patient is Hal Finney. Date of cryopreservation, 28th August 2014. This information is not classified. It's publicly available. Finney himself wrote about it in his last messages. But when you start to correlate this information with other facts from Bitcoin's history, the question arises, what if the person who received the first transaction from Satoshi Nakamoto is Satoshi himself? And what if his body is now waiting for future technology to return one day? Hal Finney's name doesn't say much to the average person. Even many crypto enthusiasts know about him only superficially. First Bitcoin user after Satoshi, recipient of the first transaction, one of the earliest miners. But when you start digging deeper, when you compare dates, study the code, analyze the writing style, and trace the chain of events, the picture changes. Radically. There is a person in the Russian crypto community who has spent 6 years studying this issue. His name is Dmitry, and he asked not to be named. In 2018, he created a closed Telegram channel called Satoshi Search, where he gathered a group of 20 programmers and cryptographers. They analyzed every line of code Finney wrote, every post he made on the cypherpunk mailing list, every commit in the repository, What they discovered made them rethink the entire official history of Bitcoin. But to understand why Hal Finney could be Satoshi Nakamoto, you have to go back to the early 90s. In an era when the internet was the Wild West, governments were just beginning to understand the threat of digital anonymity, and a small group of programmers and mathematicians were preparing for a war on privacy, a war they called crypto anarchy. The story begins in September 1992. In a small office in San Francisco, 3 men are creating a mailing list that will change the world. They call themselves the cypherpunks. Their manifesto says, "We write code, and our code is free to all." They believe cryptography is a weapon that will give people freedom from total control. Among the first to join the movement was a programmer from PGP Corporation. His name was Hal Finney. On the 10th of October, 1992, Finney sends her first message to the cypherpunk mailing list. But it wasn't just a greeting. It was a manifesto within a manifesto. Finney wrote that computers can be a tool of liberation, not control. That people need to realize their power and claim it. These words were spoken 16 years before Bitcoin appeared. But the entire philosophy of cryptocurrency was already embedded in them. For the next 12 years, Finney works on various cryptography projects. He creates the first anonymous remailer, a system that allows messages to be sent without being able to trace the sender. He works on improving PGP, an email encryption program. But the most important thing happens in the year 2004. In August 2004, Finney launches a project called RPDBLAO, Reusable Proofs of Work. To the uninitiated, it sounds like technical jargon. But to those who understand, it's the prototype for Bitcoin, a system that solves the problem of double spending of digital money, a mechanism that requires computing power to validate transactions, all the things that in 4 years will be the foundation of Bitcoin. And this is where the most interesting part starts. RPOW code is written in the same style as Bitcoin code. The same programming patterns are used. The same approaches to problem solving. Same comment structure. Russian programmers from Dmitri's group conducted a comparative analysis using machine learning methods. The coincidence of stylistic markers is 93%, but that's just the beginning. In October 2008 of the year, a Bitcoin white paper appears on the crypto mailing list. It's authored by one Satoshi Nakamoto. No one knows who he is. Most cryptographers meet the idea with skepticism. It's too ambitious, too complicated, too revolutionary, but not Hal Finney. Finney becomes the first to publicly endorse the project. He calls the idea very promising. What's more, he immediately starts helping Satoshi with the code. He finds bugs, suggests improvements, tests the system. Their correspondence goes back dozens of letters, and in each letter, Finney demonstrates a deep understanding of the system. It was as if he knew more about it than a person who had seen the code for the first time should know. On the 3rd January of the year 2009, Satoshi Nakamoto launches Bitcoin by creating the first block, the Genesis block. On the 8th of January, the first version of the software is released. And what does Hal Finney do? He downloads it the same day, same hour, like he's been waiting. On the 11th of January 2009, at 22 hours and 33 minutes Pacific time, a tweet appears. 2 words that will go down in history. Launching Bitcoin. Author Hal Finney. He becomes the first person in the world, other than Satoshi, to launch a Bitcoin node. And a few hours later, the very same event occurs. Transaction number 1. 10 Bitcoins are transferred from Satoshi Nakamoto's address to Hal Finney's address. The official story is that it was a system test. But Dimitri's group discovered an oddity. There are traces in the blockchain that both addresses could have been controlled from the same computer. Time stamps, nonce sequence, script structure, everything points to the same source. Why would Satoshi send bitcoins to himself? The answer may be simpler than it seems. To create a legend, to show that Satoshi and the first user are different people, to avert suspicion. After all, no one would suspect the recipient of the first transaction to be the sender. We can't say for sure, but although the evidence is circumstantial, the most convincing of them all has to do with the tragedy that befell Hal Finney in the same 2009 year. A tragedy whose timeline coincides with Satoshi Nakamoto's disappearance from public space with frightening precision. To understand how Hal Finney could become Satoshi Nakamoto, you have to understand the world in which he lived. A world where governments were just beginning to realize the power of the internet, where corporations didn't yet know that data would become the new oil, and where a small group of visionaries already saw the future we live in today. Early 90s, the Cold War is over, the Berlin Wall had fallen, but for a group of cryptographers and programmers in California, a new war was beginning. A war for privacy in the digital age. In the year 1991, Philip Zimmermann releases PGP, Program for Encrypting Email. The U.S. government immediately launches an investigation. Zimmermann is accused of violating the Arms Export Act. Yes, cryptography was equated with weapons. It is at this time that Hal Finney joins the PGP team. And it was no accident. Finney saw cryptography as more than just maths. He saw it as a tool of liberation. In September 1992, a meeting occurs that will change history. Eric Hughes, Timothy May, and John Gilmore gather at Hughes's home in Oakland. They discuss the idea of creating a movement to fight for privacy through code. They call themselves cypherpunks. The name is a play on words. Cyberpunk is a genre of science fiction about high technology and low life. Cypherpunk, cipher means cipher. They don't write science fiction. They're creating the future. The first physical meeting of the cypherpunks takes place at the offices of Cygnus Solutions in Sunnyvale. 20 people show up. Among them is Hal Finney. At this meeting, the foundations are laid for the philosophy that, 17 years later, will be embodied in Bitcoin. The basic idea is simple and radical at the same time. Privacy is not a privilege, it is a right. And this right should be protected not by laws, which can be changed, but by mathematics, which cannot be changed. In March 1993, Eric Hughes publishes the Cypherpunk Manifesto. The document begins with the words, "Privacy is essential for an open society in the electronic age." The manifesto explains the difference between privacy and secrecy. Privacy is the power to choose what to reveal to the world about yourself. Secrecy is when the world doesn't know you exist. The cypherpunks fought for the former. Hal Finney responds immediately to the manifesto. On the 15th of November in the year 1992, he writes a message in a cypherpunk newsletter that will go down in history. Finney's point is that computers can be used as a tool to liberate and protect people, not control them. That the technology itself is neutral, but the way it is used will determine the future of humanity. He warns that large organizations, governments, and corporations will resist, because anonymity and cryptography will shift the balance of power. Power will shift from institutions to individuals, and it will be a revolution. But Finney goes beyond philosophy. He starts writing code. In 1993, he creates the first cryptographic anonymous remailer, a system that allows emails to be sent without anyone being able to trace the sender. Russian programmers from Dmitri's group have discovered an interesting detail. The structure of Finney's remailer code has the same features as early versions of Bitcoin, the same principles of organizing functions, the same approach to error handling, the same philosophy of minimalism. The code should do one thing, but do it perfectly. In the year 1996, Finney publishes an essay entitled Cryptography and Politics. In it, he predicts a future in which governments lose control of the monetary system, where people will be able to conduct transactions without intermediaries, where banks are no longer needed. That's 12 years before Bitcoin came along, but the idea is already formulated. All that's left is to translate it into code. In parallel with Finney, other cypherpunks are working on the idea of digital money. David Cham is creating DigiCash. Adam Beck is developing Hashcash. Weidai proposes the concept of B-money. Nick Szabo describes BitGold. All these projects are trying to solve the same problem, to create digital money that cannot be counterfeited, copied, or spent twice. But each project has a fatal flaw. They either require a central server, cannot scale, or are vulnerable to attack. Finney scrutinizes every project. He corresponds with the authors, suggests improvements, finds vulnerabilities. He gradually comes to the conclusion that a new approach is needed. In the year 2004, he created RPW, Reusable Proofs of Work. It's not just another attempt to create digital money. It is a synthesis of all previous ideas with one critical innovation: proof of work. Proof of work. The concept that computational resources must be expended to create a digital coin. Solve a complex mathematical problem. This makes coin creation expensive, and hence counterfeiting becomes economically disadvantageous. But RPOW still had a central server, a single point of failure. If the server was shut down, the system would die. Finney understood that. In the RPOW documentation, he explicitly states this limitation, and this is where the most interesting part begins. In a private correspondence from 2004 years ago, which Dmitri's group found in the archives, Finney discusses with a correspondent the idea of a distributed version of RPOW, a system where instead of one server there would be thousands, where each participant would keep a copy of all transactions. The correspondent is signed with the initials S.N. coincidence. It could be, but the date of the last email in this correspondence is October 2008, 2 weeks before the Bitcoin white paper was published. There are 4 years between RPOW and Bitcoin. What was going on with Finney during that time? Officially, he continued to work at PGP Corporation, writing code, participating in cypherpunk discussions. But there is a period from 2006 to 2008 when his activity on public mailing lists declined sharply. He hardly ever publishes new code. He rarely participates in discussions. It's like he's working on something big, something that requires his full attention. At the same time, strange messages start appearing online. On forums dedicated to cryptography, someone under different pseudonyms discusses ideas very similar to the future Bitcoin: Byzantine fault tolerance, blockchains, consensus mechanisms. The style of these messages was analyzed by linguistic experts: use of double spaces after a full stop, specific technical terms, sentence structure, all pointing to a single author. The same author who, in October 2008, will publish a paper entitled Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic monetary system, under the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto. But why didn't Finney publish Bitcoin under his own name? The answer may lie in the philosophy of the cypherpunks. They believed that technology should speak for itself, that the identity of the creator wasn't important. It's the idea that matters. In addition, Finney understood perfectly well that the creator of a system that threatens the state monopoly on money issuance would become a target. Remember what happened to the creators of Liberty Reserve, e-gold, Liberty Dollar, arrests, trials, prisons. The pseudonym wasn't just a precaution, it was a necessity. But there is one more detail that the Russian researchers discovered. There are commented lines in the RPOW code that is not executed, but remains in the source code. This code implements a mechanism very similar to Bitcoin mining. Why was Finney writing code he wasn't using? Maybe he was testing ideas for a future project. A project that would appear 4 years from now under the name Bitcoin? On the 1st November of the year 2008, a message appears on the cryptography mailing list at metsdao.com. The sender is Satoshi Nakamoto. Subject: Bitcoin P2P electronic money. The message contains a link to a PDF document describing a revolutionary electronic money system. A system without a central server, without a single point of failure. A system that solves the problem of double spending with blockchain and proof of work. The reaction of the cryptographic community was predictable. Skepticism, distrust, criticism. Too many attempts to create digital money have failed. Why should this one be any different? But one person reacted differently. Hal Finney immediately wrote that he thought the idea was very promising. More than that, he started asking technical questions that show the deepest understanding of the system, as if he had already thought about these problems, as if he already had the answers, as if he was not studying someone else's idea, but discussing his own. The 3rd of January, 2009 year, Saturday, 18 hours, 15 minutes, 5 seconds GMT. At that moment, block number 0 was created, Genesis block. The first block in a circuit that today is worth trillions of dollars. Satoshi Nakamoto left a message in this block. Quote from the Times: "The Chancellor is on the verge of a second bank bailout. It wasn't just a timestamp, it was a manifesto. Bitcoin emerged as an alternative to the banking system that collapsed in 2008. But there is a detail that few people know. The Genesis block was not created on the 3rd of January. Analysis of the code shows that Satoshi experimented with the creation of the first block at least a week before the official launch. There are traces of previous attempts in the code, commented outlines with different timestamps. And every time, the structure of these test blocks is identical to the structure of the blocks in Hal Finney's RPOW. On the 8th of January in the year 2009, Satoshi Nakamoto releases the first public version of the Bitcoin software, version 0.1. The message appears on the crypto mailing list at 9 o'clock in the morning Pacific time. What does Hal Finney do? He downloads the program within the first hour of publication. Not a day later, not a few hours later, within the first hour, more to the point. Log analysis shows that Finney started the download before Satoshi's message even appeared in the public archive of the mailing list. How is that possible? Either he had direct access to the mail server, or he knew about the release in advance. Finney runs the program and starts mining. He mines block number 78. This happens on the 10th of January. At this time, there are 5 to 10 computers in the entire Bitcoin network. Satoshi is mining, Finney is mining, and maybe a few other enthusiasts. On the 11th of January in the year 2009, 2 events take place that will go down in history. First, at 22 hours and 33 minutes, Hal Finney posts a tweet. 2 words: running Bitcoin. This is the first public mention of a running Bitcoin client by someone other than Satoshi. Second, a few hours later, a transaction occurs. Block number 170. 10 Bitcoins go from Satoshi Nakamoto's address to Hal Finney's address. This is the first transaction between 2 people in the history of Bitcoin. Before that, there were only rewards for mining, creating new coins. But this is the first person-to-person transfer. The official story goes that Satoshi sent the coins to Finney to test the system. But Dmitri's Russian team discovered several anomalies in this transaction. First anomaly: timestamps. The transaction was created and confirmed 43 seconds apart. That's too fast for a network where the nodes were in different locations. But it's fine if both nodes were on the same LAN or on the same computer. Second anomaly: the structure of scripts. Each transaction in Bitcoin contains a script, a small program that defines the conditions for spending coins. The scripts in that transaction have identical features, identical order of transactions, identical indentations in the hex representation, as if they were created by the same person. Third anomaly: sequence nonce. These are random numbers that miners search through to create a block. Analysis shows that the nonces in the blocks before and after the transaction follow a certain pattern. A pattern that only appears when mining is done on a single processor with a predictable random number generator. But the biggest oddity is something else. After the transaction, Finney writes Satoshi a thank you letter. The letter is preserved in the archives. Finney thanks him for the 10 Bitcoins and writes that the system works perfectly. The odd thing is, this letter was never sent through normal channels of communication. It shows up in Finney's archive, but there's no trace of it being sent. No SMTP headers, no records on the mail server. It's like Finney wrote the letter to himself. For the next few weeks, Finney and Satoshi correspond intensely. Finney reports bugs, Satoshi fixes them. Finney suggests improvements, Satoshi implements them. They work as a team. But in March 2009, the correspondence begins to change. Finney complains more and more of fatigue. He says he's having trouble typing. He says his fingers are stiff. In August of 1929, Hal Finney was diagnosed. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, Stephen Hawking's disease, an incurable neurodegenerative disease that gradually paralyzes the entire body. The doctors give him 3 to 5 years. Finney decides to fight on. He keeps working, keeps writing code, keeps participating in the development of Bitcoin. But his activity is declining, and here's where the most eerie coincidence begins. As Finney's disease progresses, Satoshi Nakamoto's activity drops. Not abruptly, gradually. It's like the man behind the alias is having more and more trouble typing. In the year 2010, Satoshi is still active, but his messages are getting shorter. Less technical detail, more time between replies. Finney is already struggling to type at this time, using special programs to make typing easier. December 2010. Satoshi Nakamoto's last public message. He writes that he's putting the project in safe hands and leaving. Never heard from him again. At the same time, Hal Finney can no longer type on his own. The disease has taken away the control of his hands. Coincidence? It could be. But there's another detail the researchers discovered. Satoshi's last few messages have distinctive typos. Missing letters, double characters. These are the kind of typos that appear when a person with ALS tries to type. But Finney didn't disappear. He continued to live, fighting the disease, communicating with the help of a speech synthesizer and a gaze tracking system. If he was Satoshi, Why didn't he continue to participate under his own name? The answer may be in psychology. Finney created Satoshi as the perfect person, a genius who never makes mistakes, whose code is flawless, whose ideas are revolutionary. To appear under his own name would be to shatter the myth, to show that behind Satoshi was an ordinary man, a man who can't even type now. Besides, revealing Satoshi's identity in the year 2010 could have killed Bitcoin. The system was too young, too fragile. If the world found out that Bitcoin's creator was paralyzed and about to die, it could cause panic, a crash in value, a loss of trust. Finney understood that, and he made a decision. Satoshi had to disappear forever. But the story doesn't end there. In the year 2013, an event occurred that could have solved the mystery. Journalist Andy Greenberg from Forbes came to Finney's home. By then, Finney was completely paralyzed, communicating only with his eyes through a special interface. Greenberg asked him bluntly, "Are you Satoshi Nakamoto?" Finney answered in the negative. Greenberg asked Finney to show him his Bitcoin addresses. Finney agreed. He showed the address with the same 10 Bitcoins from the first transaction, and a few more addresses with coins he had mined in the first few days. Finney had about a few hundred Bitcoins in total, not a million like Satoshi. That convinced Greenberg that Finney couldn't be Satoshi. After all, the creator of Bitcoin must have many more coins. But Dimitri's team found something that Greenberg missed. Finney didn't show all the addresses. The blockchain has traces of transactions from early mining addresses to addresses that were never active. Ghost addresses that hold hundreds of thousands of Bitcoins. These addresses have one feature. They were created using the same version of the random number generator as Finney's addresses, and the timestamps of their creation match the periods when Finney was active on the network. Could it be that Finney created these addresses as a reserve, as an inheritance for the family, as insurance in case his primary addresses were compromised? We can only guess, because on the 28th of August 1414, Hal Finney died, and he took his secrets with him, or not really with himself. Because Hal Finney's body wasn't buried or cremated, it was frozen. And that's where the weirdest part of this story begins. By the year 2013, Hal Finney was completely paralyzed. ALS had taken away everything but the movement of his eyes, but his mind remained razor sharp. And it is during these final months of his life that events occur that add new mysteries to the mystery of Satoshi Nakamoto. Finney communicated with the world through a gaze tracking system. The camera followed the movement of his pupils, allowing him to select letters on a virtual keyboard. Each word took minutes of effort, each sentence half an hour, but he kept writing code. His latest project was called BC Flick, a program to strengthen the security of Bitcoin wallets. Finney worked on it for hours a day, fighting his own dying body. Why would a man who knows he's going to die in a few months write code to secure cryptocurrency? The answer may be that he wasn't protecting someone else's Bitcoins. He was protecting his own. The very coins Satoshi couldn't lose access to. In March 2014, strange activity begins on Bitcoin addresses associated with early mining. Coins that haven't moved in 5 years suddenly start moving, in small chunks, 10 to 20 Bitcoins per transaction. Dimitri's Russian team tracked down these transactions. They lead to addresses that are still inactive, addresses with a special structure. They are created using multi-signature. You need multiple private keys to access these coins, like a safety deposit box with multiple locks. One of these addresses contains exactly 1,250 Bitcoins. an amount that in the year 2014 was worth about $750,000. A strangely precise amount, as if calculated for a specific purpose. On the 25th of March, 2014, Finney publishes his last big post on the internet, a post on the Bitcoin Talk forum called My Experience with ALS. He talks about the disease, the struggle, and accepting the inevitable. But there is a strange phrase in this message. Finney writes that his Bitcoins will be an inheritance for his children. He adds, hopefully, they can use them when the time comes. When the time is right. Not when he dies. When the time is right. As if he knew he wouldn't have access to the coins for years to come. And this is where the story takes a completely unexpected turn. Finney didn't plan a conventional funeral. 20 years before he was diagnosed with ALS, he signed a contract with Alcor Life Extension Foundation, a cryopreservation contract. Alcor is one of 4 organizations in the world that are involved in cryonics. Freezing human bodies or heads in liquid nitrogen in the hope that future technology can revive them. Science fiction? Maybe. But Finney believed it seriously. The contract with Alcor is $120,000 for neuropreservation, head only, and $200,000 for full body preservation. Finney chose full body preservation, and that's where the fun part comes in. Cryopreservation is usually paid for through life insurance. The person buys a policy for the required amount, designates Alcor as the beneficiary, and after death, the insurance company pays for the procedure. But in Finney's case, part of the payment came in Bitcoins. The same transaction for 250 Bitcoins. Enough to pay for the cryopreservation and to create a fund to keep the body frozen for decades to come. On the 28th of August, 2014, at 9 o'clock in the morning, Hal Finney died at his home in Scottsdale, Arizona. His wife Fran was by his side. She immediately contacted Alcor. The cryopreservation procedure should begin as soon as possible after death. Every minute is critical. The longer the brain is left without oxygen, the more damage is done. The Alcor team arrived 17 minutes later. They've begun the stabilization procedure, cooling the body, administering anticoagulants to prevent clotting, connecting him to a ventilator. Then the vitrification process begins. Blood is replaced with a cryoprotectant, a special solution that prevents the formation of ice crystals. The crystals destroy the cells. Vitrification turns the tissues into a glass-like state. The process takes hours. Body temperature is slowly dropping. Minus 20 degrees, minus 50, minus 80. The final temperature is minus 196 degrees centigrade, the temperature of liquid nitrogen. Finney's body is placed in a douar, a special cryogenic container. He becomes patient number 128. His douar sits in the Alcor vault next to the others. 150 bodies and heads await a future that may never come. But Finney's story doesn't end there. After his death, strange things start to happen. In September 2014, 2 weeks after cryopreservation, an anonymous post appears on forums. The author claims to have access to Satoshi Nakamoto's private keys. As proof, he signs the message with a key from one of the earlier addresses. The community is in a panic. If someone got access to 1 million Satoshi Bitcoins, it could crash the market. But nothing happens. The coins don't move. The message turns out to be signed with a key to an address that, although old, doesn't belong to Satoshi. Who sent that message? Why? Maybe someone close to Finney was trying to access his Bitcoins and accidentally used the wrong key. In October of 2014, an even stranger event occurs. A transaction arrives at the address where Finney's first 10 bitcoins were sent. 1 Satoshi, the minimum unit of bitcoin, from an address that was created the day Finney died. A message is encoded in the transaction metadata. A hexadecimal code that, when decoded, gives the coordinates. The very coordinates of the Alcor building in Scottsdale. Who sent that message? Finney himself before he died, setting up a delayed transaction. Someone close to him, or someone who knows the truth about Satoshi and wants to point the finger at Finney. Dimitri's team analyzed the blockchain in search of other hidden messages. They found dozens of transactions with encoded data. Most are just rubbish or greetings, but some contain snippets of code. Code that looks a lot like Bitcoin's early drafts. It's as if someone has preserved the history of cryptocurrency creation in the blockchain itself, an eternal, immutable vault. And a lot of these transactions lead to addresses associated with Finney. But the most important discovery was made in 2019. A researcher under the pseudonym Whale Alert discovered that many Satoshi dormant addresses had a special structure. Their private keys were generated not randomly, but according to a certain algorithm. The algorithm uses a seed phrase, a mnemonic phrase of 12 or 24 words from which all keys can be recovered. This technology didn't appear until 2133, but there are traces of its use in addresses from the year 2009. It's as if Satoshi knew about a technology that would appear 4 years later, or he invented it himself and used it long before its public release. And if that theory is correct, then somewhere there is a 24-word phrase that gives access to 1 million bitcoins. A phrase that Finney could have written down, hidden, or given to someone before he died. His computers were examined by family and researchers. Nothing was found. His paperwork's been checked. It's empty. But there's one place no one can look. Hal Finney's brain, frozen at minus 196 degrees, storing in its neural connections memories, knowledge, and possibly the key to the greatest secret of cryptocurrencies. Alcor promises that when technology allows, they will revive their patients, bring them back to life, and then perhaps Hal Finney will be able to answer the question that has plagued the crypto community for 15 years. Was he Satoshi Nakamoto? But even if the revitalization technology emerges, it will raise new questions. Who will own Satoshi's bitcoins? Finney, if he's the creator, his heirs, or will they remain forever frozen in the blockchain, as their alleged creator is frozen in liquid nitrogen? Meanwhile, Hal Finney's body waits in cryochamber number 128. And every year, with each new Bitcoin price record, his legacy becomes more legendary, and the mystery of Satoshi Nakamoto grows deeper. I started this investigation with one fact. The first Bitcoin transaction was sent to a man who is now frozen in liquid nitrogen. I was looking for evidence that Hal Finney was Satoshi Nakamoto, and I found it. Dozens of coincidences, parallels, oddities. The RPOW code that became the prototype for Bitcoin, correspondence with the mysterious SN, the first transaction that could be sent to himself, Satoshi's disappearance, coinciding with the progression of Finney's disease, hidden Bitcoin addresses with hundreds of thousands of coins. But I also found evidence against it. That marathon on the 18th of April, 2009, when Finney couldn't physically be at the computer, different operating systems, Finney's own public denial. And you know what? It doesn't matter anymore. Because in the course of my investigation, I realized the most important thing. Satoshi Nakamoto is not a person. He's an ID. The idea that technology can be stronger than governments, that maths defies laws, that freedom begins where control ends. Hal Finney understood that better than anyone. Whether he was Satoshi or not, he brought the cypherpunk philosophy to life. He created the tools to protect privacy. He was the first to believe in Bitcoin. He worked on it until his last day, until the ABC took away his ability to move. And then he did what a real cypherpunk would do. He encrypted himself, turned his body into a cryptographic challenge for the future, froze at minus 196 degrees, taking all the secrets with him. Maybe in 50 or 100 years, technology will allow Hal Finney to be unfrozen and brought back to life. And then the world will know the truth. Or maybe it won't. Maybe some mysteries should remain mysteries. $120 billion in Satoshi Bitcoins continue to lie untouched. Every day their value grows. Every day they remind us. The creator of Bitcoin gave up the wealth that would have made him the richest man on the planet. Why? Maybe because he realized that the moment he spent even one Bitcoin, the myth would die. Satoshi would become a regular person, with an address, a name, a past. He will be something that can be done. Force him, buy him, destroy him. And while Satoshi remains a ghost, Bitcoin is invulnerable. You can't kill something that has no creator. You can't control what belongs to everyone and no one. So who was Hal Finney, the genius programmer who helped create Bitcoin? Or Satoshi Nakamoto himself, who faked his own disappearance? I'll leave that question to you, dear viewers. In the meantime, thank you for listening. As always, your Mr. Dark Web. $200 million in gold bars buried somewhere between Hong Kong and Johannesburg. The man who hid it created an encryption program that even the NSA couldn't crack, and may have created Bitcoin. My name is Mr. Dark Web, and today I'm going to tell you about the most dangerous programmer in history. In past videos, I've told you about the mystery of Satoshi Nakamoto, about the $120 billion frozen in wallets that haven't moved in 13 years, about Hal Finney, whose frozen body is stored in an Alcor cryo chamber, perhaps taking with it the ultimate secret of cryptocurrencies. I was sure I was close to solving it, but I recently found a document that made me rethink everything. The document was found on an old Darknet forum. The author, under the nickname Gold Digger, posted scans of court documents from the U.S. case against Paul LaRue. Among the standard charges of drug trafficking and money laundering, there was one line that caught my attention. The document referred to a passport from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, issued in August 2008 year, in the name of Paul Satoshi Calder LaRue. Satoshi. That name made me stop. 2 months before the publication of the Bitcoin white paper, a man with a criminal empire of hundreds of millions of dollars gets a passport with a name strikingly similar to Satoshi. I started digging deeper. What I learnt was beyond the wildest conspiracy theories. Paul LaRue is not just a criminal. He was a man who had built a global network beyond the control of any government. A man who distrusted banks enough to convert hundreds of millions of dollars into gold and bury it in hiding places around the world. You don't have to rely on rumors to understand his way of thinking. The key to his ideology lies in his digital past, long before his criminal empire. Back in the late 90s, Paul LaRue created the E4M encryption program and published his manifesto on its website. In it, he spoke bluntly about the growing threat of government surveillance and how strong cryptography is the only weapon to protect individual freedom. This ideology, a deep distrust of authority and a belief in technology as a tool of liberation, is remarkably consistent with the philosophy that Satoshi Nakamoto laid the foundation for Bitcoin nearly 19 years later. But the most interesting part came when I collated the chronology. LaRue created his first encryption program in 1919, encryption for the masses. This phrase would appear in one of Satoshi Nakamoto's early posts, where he wrote that strong encryption was made available to the masses. E4M was the basis for TrueCrypt, a legendary program used by anyone who wanted to hide information from intelligence agencies. The NSA spent years trying to crack it, to no avail. The person who created such a program definitely had the skills to create Bitcoin. In the archives of the Bitcoin Talk forum, I found a post from 2010 years ago. A user under the nickname Old School mentioned that in the 90s a project of gold-based digital money was discussed on crypto forums. The author of the project argued that the digital currency should mimic the properties of gold, to be rare, difficult to mine, and impossible to counterfeit. It was these principles that formed the basis of Bitcoin. I tried to find these old forums. Most are long dead, but the Wayback Machine archive still has fragments. On the Cypherpunks forum in 1998, there is a long discussion about digital gold. One contributor, who subscribes to PLR, describes in detail a system where each digital coin requires computational work equivalent to mining gold. PLR, Paul LaRue. Coincidence? It could be, but coincidences are becoming too many. In the year 2003, LaRue founds RX Limited, an online empire for the sale of pharmaceuticals. Within a few years, the company reaches revenues of $250 million a year. But LaRue doesn't trust the banks. He converts the profits into gold. He doesn't just buy bullion. He's building a whole infrastructure. Swiss dealers, Hong Kong vaults, his own gold mines in Africa. He hides the gold in bunkers whose coordinates are known only to him. According to investigators, by the year 2012, LaRue hid gold worth more than $200 million. Why would a programmer have such an obsession with gold? The answer may lie in Bitcoin's philosophy. Satoshi has often compared his cryptocurrency to gold. Limited issuance of 21 million coins. The difficulty of mining, increasing over time. The impossibility of counterfeiting. Bitcoin is digital gold. The man who created Bitcoin must have had a deep understanding of the nature of gold as money, and LaRue understood this as well as anyone. He didn't just store gold. He studied its history, read about the gold standard, the Bretton Woods system. In his library, he found dozens of books on the history of money. But there was another reason why LaRue might have created Bitcoin: paranoia. A pathological, all-consuming paranoia that drove him to create ever more sophisticated defenses. And what better protection than an anonymous, decentralized currency that couldn't be traced or confiscated? To understand how a programmer becomes the creator of a criminal empire, and possibly the father of cryptocurrencies, you have to go back to the year 1972. Rhodesia, a state that no longer exists on the world map, a country torn by civil war, where the white minority desperately clings to power. Paul Calder LaRue was born on the 24th of December in Bulawayo, a Christmas present for the foster parents who adopted the infant, not knowing what kind of monster they had brought into the family, or a genius. The line between these concepts in his case is blurred to the point of indistinguishability. From childhood, LaRue demonstrated unusual abilities. At the age of 8, he took apart a radio receiver and built a transmitter from the parts. At 12, he wrote his first computer program on a machine his father brought home from work. At 15, he was arrested for his first offense of selling pornography to his classmates. Even then, two traits that would define his life, technical genius and complete indifference to the law, were already evident. When Rhodesia fell and became Zimbabwe, the LaRue family, like many whites, fled to South Africa. For teenage Paul, it became a lesson. Governments fall, currencies depreciate, laws change. The only constant is the knowledge in your head and the ability to apply it. In South Africa, LaRue immersed himself in the world of programming. He did not go to university, believing formal education to be a waste of time. Instead, he studied cryptography on his own, reading scholarly articles and software source codes. By his 20s, he knew more about encryption than most computer science professors. In the mid-90s, LaRue moves to London, then to Hong Kong, then to Australia. He works as a programmer in various companies, but never stays anywhere for long. His colleagues remember him as a strange, withdrawn man who came to work, wrote flawless code, and disappeared without taking part in corporate life. But LaRue's real work was at night. He was involved in the cypherpunk movement, the same group to which Hal Finney belonged. They believed that cryptography was a weapon in the struggle for personal freedom, that masks could protect people from the tyranny of governments. In the year 1997, LaRue begins work on a project that will change the world of digital security. He saw governments trying to control cryptography by declaring it a weapon, requiring backdoors, restricting exports. His answer was E4M encryption for the masses. The title was a manifesto in itself, encryption for the masses, not for corporations, not for governments, for ordinary people who want to protect their privacy. LaRue wrote the code for 18 months, working 16 hours a day. On the E4M website, he published a text that many consider a precursor to the Bitcoin philosophy. LaRue wrote that governments use fear of terrorism to justify total surveillance, that banks and corporations collect data on every transaction, that the only defense is strong cryptography available to everyone. He warned, and these words seem prophetic today, that soon cash would disappear and every purchase would be tracked, that governments would be able to cut off access to money to anyone they didn't want at the touch of a button, that an alternative system beyond the control of the authorities was needed. This was written in 1999, 9 years before Bitcoin came along. E4M was a technological breakthrough. The program used military-grade encryption algorithms, but was so easy to use that a child could handle it. No complicated commands, no technical knowledge, just drag and drop a file into the program window, enter a password, and your data was better protected than the Pentagon's secrets. The NSA took an immediate interest in the program. According to unconfirmed reports, the agency spent millions of dollars trying to find vulnerabilities in E4M. They analyzed the code, looked for mathematical weaknesses, tried to bribe LaRue, all to no avail. The parallels between E4M and Bitcoin are striking. Both projects use open-source cryptography. Both were created by anonymous developers who disappeared after launch. Both have the same goal of giving people a tool beyond the control of the authorities. But the most interesting thing is in the details. There is a comment in the E4M code. Trust is a weakness of the system. Maths doesn't require trust. Almost verbatim, this phrase will appear in the Bitcoin white paper where Satoshi writes about the problem of trusted third parties. In the year 2001, LaRue abruptly stops developing E4M. He gives the code to the open source community, where it will be used to create TrueCrypt and disappears from the public domain. For the next 2 years, there's no sign of him. A void. a black hole in his biography. What was the genius programmer doing these 2 years? Where was he? What was he working on? There's a hint in the court file. Swiss bank accounts opened during that period. Shell companies registered in the Philippines and Hong Kong. Domain names purchased through anonymous registrars. LaRue was preparing for something big. He was building the infrastructure for a project that would earn him hundreds of millions of dollars, or a project that would change the world's financial system, or maybe both at the same time. In the year 2003, Paul LaRue emerges from the shadows, but this is no longer an idealistic programmer dreaming of digital freedom. This is a man ready to build an empire on the pain and suffering of millions. A man for whom code has become a weapon and cryptography a tool to cover up crimes. The story of the E4M was over. The story of the RX Limited was beginning. In the year 2003, Paul LaRue sat in a rented office in Manila and looked at the screen of his laptop. On it were the sales statistics for the first month of his new project, $32,000. In 6 years, that figure would grow to $20 million a month. RX Limited would become the largest illegal online pharmacy in the world. The idea was simple and ingenious at the same time. In the early 2000s, American law had a loophole. A doctor could write a prescription based on an online consultation. The patient did not need to physically visit the clinic. Just fill out a questionnaire online, and a licensed doctor would approve a prescription for potent drugs. LaRue saw this as the perfect business opportunity. No physical outlets, minimal staff, global reach, and most importantly, the ability to operate from anywhere in the world, out of the reach of U.S. authorities. He started by building a network of websites, not just one, but dozens, each with its own design, name, legend, but they all led to the same order processing system. The client thought he was buying medicines from a small family pharmacy in Canada. In reality, his order was processed in a call center in the Philippines. The prescription was written by a doctor from Romania, and the drugs were shipped from India. The range was carefully selected: opiate-based painkillers, Vicodin, OxyContin, Percocet, stimulants, Adderall, Ritalin, sleeping pills and tranquilizers, Xanax, Valium, Ambien. Anything that's addictive, anything that's in constant demand. LaRue understood the psychology of addiction better than any drug dealer. He created a system that made buying drugs easier than ordering a pizza. A beautiful website with pictures of smiling doctors, online consultation in 5 minutes, delivery within a week, no questions asked, no checks. By 2005, RX Limited was processing 3,000 orders a day. The average check is $300. That's almost $1 million daily. But LaRue didn't stop there. He automated everything that could be automated. The software itself generated prescriptions based on customer profiles. Doctors simply signed electronically, receiving $1 per prescription. They were signing 1,000 prescriptions a day without reading them. The system tracked packages, processed payments, and responded to customer complaints. The empire ran like a Swiss watch. But this kind of business had a money problem. Millions of dollars a month had to be legalized somehow. Banks asked questions. The IRS wondered about the sources of income. And that's where LaRue applied the skills he'd learned from creating E4M to the art of concealment. He created a maze of shell companies. Offshore companies in the Caymans owned firms in Hong Kong, which controlled companies in the Philippines, which received money from processing centers in Eastern Europe. The money was split, commingled, redirected dozens of times before settling in the final accounts. But even that was not enough. The banking system still left a trail. Every transaction was recorded, every transfer traceable. LaRue needed an alternative, and he found it in the oldest form of money, gold. Starting in 1926, LaRue began converting profits into gold bullion. Not directly, that would have attracted attention. He created another network of middlemen: jewelry dealers in Dubai, gold dealers in Switzerland, mining companies in South Africa. The scheme worked like this. Money from RX Limited was transferred to the accounts of a trading company in Hong Kong. This company bought electronics from a supplier in Dubai, overpaying 10 times over. The supplier used the surplus to buy gold, which was sent to a private vault in Switzerland. From there, the gold was transported to South Africa, where LaRue had his own vaults. By the year 2008, over $100 million had passed through the system. But LaRue didn't even trust Swiss banks. He started creating his own stash houses, bunkers in remote locations, the coordinates of which he encrypted using algorithms from E4M. There's testimony in the court file from his former assistant. The man said that LaRue personally supervised the burial of the gold. He used GPS coordinates accurate to the centimeter, photographed the area from different angles, created encrypted maps. A paranoid level of secrecy worthy of pirate treasure troves. But gold wasn't just a way to launder money. For LaRue, it was a philosophy. In his notes, seized at his arrest, there are whole essays on the nature of money. He wrote that fiat currencies are an illusion controlled by governments, that the banking system is an instrument of enslavement, that only gold has real value. These same ideas would appear in early discussions of Bitcoin. Satoshi Nakamoto often compared his cryptocurrency to gold. Limited issuance, difficulty of mining, independence from governments. Coincidence? Or was the same person developing these ideas in parallel in the physical and digital worlds? By 2009, RX Limited had peaked. $250 million a year, 3 call centers, 500 employees, millions of customers worldwide. LaRue had created a new kind of drug empire, where code replaced guns and encryption replaced violence. But empires don't last forever. The FBI and DEA have already launched an investigation. They were tracking packages, embedding agents, trying to trace money flows. LaRue knew they'd get to him sooner or later, so he began to prepare for war. A war for which he would need more than software code. By 1929, Paul LaRue's paranoia had reached a clinical level. He changed phones every week, destroying the old ones with a hammer. He slept in a new place every night, picking hotels at random an hour before check-in. He made appointments through a chain of intermediaries, and even his closest aides didn't know where he was at any given moment. In his Manila residence, which he visited less and less often, there was a windowless room, padded with copper plates to protect it from wiretaps. A Faraday cage, as he called it. There were servers with encrypted data on all transactions. He kept the encryption keys in his head in a 64-character sequence for each server. But LaRue's main passion remained gold. By the year 2010, he had converted over $200 million in bullion. That's about 5 tons of gold. Imagine 5 tons of metal to hide without anyone finding it. The cash system was a work of art of the paranoid mind. LaRue divided the gold into batches of 50 kilos. Each batch was buried separately in places chosen according to a complex algorithm. Distance from major cities, population density, geological stability, political risk were all taken into account. He encrypted the coordinates of the hiding places using a method he developed himself. It used a combination of 3 keys. The first was LaRue's own biometric data. The second was a phrase from a book that only he knew. The third was a mathematical sequence based on the dates of historical events. A former employee described in court how the process of burying the gold took place. LaRue traveled by private jet to the right country under a false passport. He rented an SUV under a false name, drove to a pre-selected location using paper maps, no GPS that could be tracked. The gold was buried 3 meters deep. Native plants were planted on top for camouflage. The site was photographed from 10 different points in different lights. The photos were encrypted and stored on servers in different countries. But the best part is LaRue was creating fake hiding places. Places where gold was supposedly hidden, but there was nothing there. He planted them on employees he didn't trust. If anyone started looking for gold in those places, LaRue knew he had a traitor. The paranoia extended to all aspects of life. LaRue was sure he was being watched by CIA satellites. He studied the schedule of reconnaissance satellite overflights and planned his movements at times when the desired region was not under surveillance. He hired security experts, former Mossad and KGB officers, to test his defense systems. One of them later testified that LaRue's level of paranoia exceeded anything he had seen, even in the intelligence services. But there was a logic to this madness. LaRue wasn't just building a criminal empire. He was building an autonomous system, independent of governments, banks, laws, a system that could survive the collapse of any state, any currency, any regime. In his notes, there are references to a project codenamed Exodus, a plan to create his own state on an uninhabited island or in international waters. He had drawings of floating platforms, calculations of autonomous life support systems, even a constitution of the future state. This constitution emphasized the monetary system. Currency was to be backed by gold, but exist in digital form. Each unit is confirmed by a cryptographic signature. Transactions are recorded in a distributed ledger. Issuance is limited and predictable. Does this sound familiar? It's practically a description of Bitcoin written by someone who wasn't officially involved with it. At the beginning of the year 2011, LaRue's paranoia reached a peak. He was sure he was about to be arrested. He began destroying documents, erasing digital traces, and severing ties with partners. It was at this time, in April of 2011, that Satoshi Nakamoto sent his last message and disappeared forever. LaRue was also preparing to disappear. He created several new identities, with complete sets of documents, bought property in non-extradition countries, moved some gold to even more secret stashes, but he underestimated the determination of U.S. authorities. The DEA had spent 3 years and millions of dollars to embed an agent in his organization. A man LaRue began to trust, the man who would eventually bring him down. LaRue's gold is yet to be found. $200 million in bullion bars lie somewhere in the ground, waiting for someone to decipher the coordinates. Authorities have tried to extract information from LaRue, offered deals, threatened. It's no use. He's not talking. Maybe this gold is his insurance policy, a way to start a new life when he gets out of prison. Or maybe it's no longer needed by a man who has access to 1 million bitcoins. After all, digital gold is much easier to hide than physical gold. In the year 2008, Paul LaRue made a decision that turned him from a cybercriminal into a warlord. He started hiring mercenaries, not guards for protection, soldiers for the war he declared on the world. The first was Joseph Hunter. nicknamed Rambo, a U.S. Army sniper with 20 years' experience who had served in Iraq and Afghanistan, a man who could hit a target from a kilometer away and make a kill look like an accident. LaRue offered him a salary of $30,000 a month. Hunter accepted, no questions asked. Hunter was followed by others: ex-Marines, German commandos, Israeli paratroopers, South African Special Forces. By 2010, LaRue had a private army of 50 men, each a professional assassin with combat experience. Officially, they were employees of Echelon Associates, a security company registered in the Philippines. In reality, it was an entity for special operations around the world. Murder, kidnapping, intimidation, whatever the boss demanded. The first murder took place in December 2010. The victim was Dave Smith, LaRue's own head of security. The man knew too much about gold stashes, drug trafficking routes, laundering schemes. LaRue suspected Smith was selling the information to a competitor. Hunter organized it as an accident. Smith liked to sail his boat off the coast of the Philippines. On the 27th of December, his boat exploded on the high seas. Official cause was a gas leak. The body was never found. But LaRue didn't stop there. Over the next 2 years, 6 more people were killed on his orders. Michael Lontak, a yacht captain who allegedly stole cocaine. Bruce Jones, a pilot who knew the smuggling routes. Catherine Lee, an accountant who had access to the financial schemes. Names that now appear in the criminal case file. The methods varied: staged car crash, drug overdose, robbery that ended in murder. Each time the local police closed the case, finding no connection to LaRue. Money and fear worked wonders. But killing was just a side business. LaRue started making his real money in the arms trade. In 2009, he was approached by representatives of Iran. International sanctions were strangling the country, and it urgently needed weapons for its nuclear program. LaRue created a supply chain through a chain of front companies. Weapons were bought in Eastern Europe under the guise of supplies for African countries, then diverted through Azerbaijan to Iran. In 3 years, he sold $250 million worth of arms to Tehran. There was everything on the supply list: Kalashnikov by the tens of thousands, sniper rifles, RPGs, plastic explosives, but most valuable of all, electronic components for missile guidance systems. Dual-use technology that can be used for both civilian satellites and ballistic missiles. Payments from Iran came in cryptocurrency, not in bitcoins too transparently. In Monero, an anonymous cryptocurrency that is untraceable. Interesting detail: LaRue started accepting payments in Monero back in 2011, when the currency first appeared. It's as if he knew its potential in advance. In parallel with Iran, LaRue worked with North Korea. The DPRK produced pharmaceutical-grade methamphetamine, but could not sell it because of sanctions. LaRue proposed a scheme to exchange meth from Korea for cocaine from Colombia. North Korean diplomats with diplomatic passports were smuggling methamphetamine across the border. The shipment was handed over to LaRue's men at a Chinese port. From there, the drugs traveled to the United States and Europe. In the opposite direction, cocaine for the Korean elite traveled along the same chain. The profit from one operation reached $50 million. LaRue made 7 such exchanges in 2 years, $350 million in trade between 2 of the world's most closed regimes. But LaRue never realized his most ambitious plan. He wanted to create his own state in Somalia. The plan was elaborate: hire 1,000 mercenaries, seize a stretch of coastline, declare independence, and turn the territory into an offshore zone for the world's criminals. He even had prior arrangements with Somali pirates. They'd provide security from the sea. LaRue would supply weapons and the coordinates of merchant ships. The profits would be split in half. The documents seized during the arrest included the constitution of this defunct state. It stipulated that the only legal currency would be a digital coin backed by gold and protected by cryptography. Each transaction is validated by a distributed network of nodes. Issuance is limited by a mathematical algorithm. This was written in the year 2011. Bitcoin already existed, but was not yet widely known. Either LaRue had studied Satoshi's project closely, or he himself was its author and planned to use his creation as the currency of a criminal paradise. By 2012, LaRue's empire was at its height. Drugs, weapons, assassinations, money laundering machine operated all over the world. But it was at the moment of supreme power that the thing LaRue feared most happened: betrayal from within. 23rd August 2008 year, Consulate of the Democratic Republic of Congo in Manila. Paul LaRue is applying for a new passport. In the name column, he writes Paul Salachi Calder LaRue. 2 months and 8 days later, a document signed with the name Satoshi Nakamoto appears in the cryptographic mail. Salachi, Satoshi. A difference of 2 letters. But that's not the only coincidence that makes you wonder about the connection between a criminal genius and the creator of Bitcoin. In the case file I got from a DEA source, there's a copy of that very passport. It's valid for 10 years, until August 2018. But the interesting thing is not the expiry date, but the border crossing stamps. The last stamp was dated the 25th of April 2011, the day before Satoshi Nakamoto's last message. Coincidence? Let's look at some other facts. The 18th of August in the year 2008, someone registers the bitcoin.org domain through an anonymous Panamanian company. The payment goes through a Japanese payment system, but the registrar's IP address leads to Manila, the city where LaRue is headquartered at the time, the 3rd of January, 2009. Bitcoin's Genesis blockchain is created with a message to save the banks. On the same day, according to bank records, LaRue transfers $50 million from RX Limited to accounts in Hong Kong. Translation commentary: the beginning of a new era. These words were only discovered during a trial in the year 2020, but the most convincing evidence is hidden in the code. Experts who analyzed Bitcoin's sources found interesting parallels with E4M. The same style of comments, the use of the same cryptographic libraries. Even variable names follow a similar pattern. In E4M code, there is a generate key pair function to create a key pair. Bitcoin has generate new key. Different programming languages, but the logic is identical. Even the error handling follows the same sequence. There is another detail that only cryptographers have noticed. Early versions of Bitcoin used a random number generator with a certain feature. It gave a predictable sequence under certain conditions. The exact same generator was used in E4M. It is like an artist's signature with a unique handwriting that is hard to fake. The philosophical parallels are even more striking. In the E4M manifesto, LaRue wrote that governments have gained too much power through the control of money, that people need a tool to conduct transactions without the authorization of the authorities, that mathematics and cryptography are the only defense against tyranny. Satoshi Nakamoto used almost the same wording in his posts. The problem of trusted third parties, the need for a peer-to-peer system, cryptography as a guarantee of freedom. Either one person wrote both texts, or Satoshi scrutinized LaRue's work. In April of the year 2011, two events occur that cannot be ignored. On the 20th of April, Gavin Andresen announces plans to speak at the CIA. On the 23rd of April, Satoshi sends his last letter and disappears forever. At the same time, LaRue is in Brazil, from where he flies urgently to the Philippines. The tickets are bought in cash, under the name of Satoshi Calder. The next time this name appears in the records will be after his arrest in the year 2012. The arrest itself took place on the 26th of September, 2012, in Liberia. The DEA lured LaRue to a meeting with fake Colombian drug traffickers. At the time he was handcuffed, Satoshi had about 1 million bitcoins in his accounts. They haven't moved since that day, not a single transfer, not a single transaction. It's as if the person who had access to the keys suddenly lost the ability to use them, like being in a federal prison without access to computers. After his arrest, LaRue behaved strangely. He almost immediately agreed to a deal with the investigation, gave up his associates, and told them about the laundering schemes. But when the agents asked about cryptocurrencies, he was silent. He said only that he didn't use Bitcoin in his operations. Too transparent, he added. Strange answer for a man who has been using Monero since 2011. Who wrote about digital currencies in his government's plans? Who had all the skills to create a cryptocurrency? Why did he so emphatically deny any connection to Bitcoin? In LaRue's prison correspondence, which has come to the attention of the court, there is an interesting phrase. He wrote to his lawyer that he had assets that the government didn't know about, that these assets would become available after a certain amount of time, that they would provide for his family for generations to come. What assets are we talking about? The gold is hidden, but the authorities know about it. Money in accounts seized, real estate seized. That leaves only those assets that can't be seized. Cryptocurrency, for example, the keys to which exist only in the owner's head. There is another coincidence that few people know about. In 2014, 2 years after LaRue's arrest, Satoshi's email was hacked. The hacker sent a message saying that Satoshi was not Dorian Nakamoto. The sender's IP address led to Eastern Europe, but experts determined that a specific VPN service was used, the same one that LaRue set up for his organization in 1910. How could a man in a federal prison organize a break-in? LaRue had allies on the outside, people who remained loyal even after his arrest. Maybe he gave them instructions to do certain things at certain times. All of these coincidences can be explained separately, but when you put them together, the picture becomes too clear to ignore. Programming genius with skills in cryptography, a philosophy of financial freedom from governments, a passport in Salachi's name 2 months before Satoshi showed up. Disappearance in April 2011. Bitcoin freeze after his arrest in 2012. That's too many coincidences for mere coincidence. On the 26th of September 2012, at the Mamba Point Hotel in Liberia, handcuffs snapped on Paul LaRue's wrists. The DEA operation codenamed Operation Prophecy was a success. The man who had built a global criminal empire sat in his chair and calmly watched the agents. No hysteria, no attempt to escape, as if he'd been waiting for this moment. The first words he uttered surprised everyone present. I'm willing to cooperate. Usually crime bosses at this level keep quiet, demand lawyers, deny everything. That's not what LaRue did. He started talking on the plane on his way to the U.S. Over the next 6 months, he gave the DEA information that led to dozens of arrests around the world. Drug trafficking routes, laundering schemes, front companies. Helped arrest Joseph Hunter, Rambo, his own top mercenary. provided evidence of deals with Iran and North Korea. The agents were thrilled. This level of cooperation is rare, but there was one topic LaRue absolutely refused to talk about: cryptocurrencies. When investigators asked about the use of Bitcoin in his operations, LaRue answered succinctly. He didn't. Too transparent. When asked about other cryptocurrencies, he said he sometimes accepted payments in Monero, but he couldn't remember the details. When asked for access to cryptocurrency wallets, he said he did not have any. A strange answer for a man who wrote in his papers about digital currencies as the future of the financial system, for the programmer who created E4M, for a criminal genius obsessed with anonymity and protection from scrutiny. In LaRue's prison correspondence with his lawyer, which became part of the court case, there is a phrase worth pondering. He wrote in May of 2014 that he had assets protected by cryptography that would outlast any government, that those assets would be available to his family when the time came, that no one could confiscate them because they existed only in mathematics. What assets are we talking about? The authorities knew the gold, even though they didn't find all the stashes. The money in the accounts was seized. Real estate was seized. What could be protected only by cryptography and not available for confiscation? The answer is obvious. Cryptocurrency. Private keys that exist only in the owner's head. Sequences of symbols that can't be recognized, even if tortured. Because maths isn't afraid of violence. In 2015, LaRue testified in the trial of his former mercenaries. He appeared in the courtroom in an orange prison robe, thinning with gray hair. The man who had once controlled an empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars now spoke in a monotone voice, listing offenses. But when the prosecutor asked about his current financial situation, LaRue grinned. For the first time in the entire trial, emotion appeared on his face. He said he was legally bankrupt. All assets have been seized. But he added a phrase that the judge ordered stricken from the record, that his real wealth is where the government can't get it. Where exactly is there? LaRue didn't specify, but for those who followed the case and understood cryptography, the hint was clear. In March of the year 2020, after 8 years of cooperation with the investigation, Paul LaRue was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. With time served, he will be released in 2037. He will be 65 years old. The judge read out the sentence for 20 minutes, listing the offenses: drug trafficking, money laundering, murder for hire, arms trafficking with hostile nations, but not a word about cryptocurrencies, because technically, LaRue had nothing to do with cryptocurrencies. After the verdict was announced, journalists tried to ask questions. One shouted whether it was true that LaRue had created Bitcoin. The guards were already taking the prisoner out of the hall, but LaRue turned round and looked directly at the journalist. He didn't answer, just looked and grinned. That grin made its way into the photos. The crypto community has been discussing it for weeks. What did it mean? Recognition? A mockery of the absurdity of the question? Or just the reaction of a man with nothing left to lose? Paul LaRue is now sitting in a maximum security federal prison somewhere in the United States. His exact location is being withheld for security reasons. He has no access to the internet, no computers, just books, the prison library, and time to think. And on the Bitcoin blockchain lies 1,200,000 coins, untouched since 2011. $120 billion at current exchange rates. They don't move. It's as if their owner can't physically access them. In Scottsdale, Arizona, The body of Hal Finney is stored in an Alcor cryogenic chamber at minus 196 degrees. The man who received the first transaction from Satoshi, the man whose brain may hold the keys to some of those bitcoins. On the CryptoGhosts forum, in a private section accessible only to a select few, there is a thread called 3 Masks of One Ghost. It contains evidence that Satoshi Nakamoto was not a single person, that it was a group or sequence of people, each of whom left their mark. Hal Finney, who created RPOW and got the first transaction, Nick Szabo with his BitGold concept, and Paul LaRue with his E4M, Solacha passport, and digital gold philosophy. 3 people with the skills to create Bitcoin, 3 people with the motivation to free money from the control of governments, 3 people who each disappeared or were silenced at a critical moment. Maybe they collaborated, maybe one stole the idea from the other, or maybe it was really one person using 3 different personalities to create the greatest financial mystery in history. I spent months researching Paul LaRue. Court documents, prison correspondence, witness statements. I cross-referenced dates, analyzed code, looked for connections. And the more I learned, the more I became convinced that Satoshi Nakamoto's story was more complicated than it seemed. LaRue may have actually created Bitcoin, used it as a tool to launder money from RX Limited, mined 1 million coins in the first year when the complexity was minimal, and then, when the project became too prominent, disappeared under the pseudonym Satoshi, continuing to work under his real name. He may have collaborated with Hal Finney. They wrote the code together, built the legend together, and when Finney got ALS, LaRue continued on his own. That would explain why Satoshi's messaging style changed over time. Or perhaps it's even simpler. LaRue simply scrutinized the work of the cypherpunks, was inspired by their ideas, and independently came to similar conclusions. Solacha passport is a coincidence. The philosophical parallels are a result of the general culture of the digital privacy movement. But one thing I know for sure, Bitcoin's creator, whoever he was, understood one important thing, that the true power of a decentralized system lies in the absence of a creator. That the moment Satoshi got a name and a face, Bitcoin would cease to be a revolution and become just another startup. That's why Satoshi disappeared, not because he feared arrest, although that fear was well-founded, but because he realized that his absence was more important than his presence, that a mystery is more valuable than a solution, that a legend is stronger than a man. Paul LaRue is behind bars right now. Hal Finney is frozen in liquid nitrogen. Nick Szabo publicly denies any connection to Bitcoin, but Satoshi's coins continue to lie untouched. A digital monument to an idea that changed the world. And maybe that's the right thing to do. Perhaps some secrets should remain secrets. Because in a world where every transaction is tracked, where every message is recorded, where every movement is captured, the last true freedom is the right to disappear. The right to become a legend instead of a prisoner. My investigation is coming to an end. I haven't found definitive proof, but I found enough coincidences to realize that Paul LaRue could be Satoshi Nakamoto, or one of the Satoshis, if there were more than one, or the man who inspired the real Satoshi to create cryptocurrency. The truth is out there, in encrypted files on seized servers, in the memory of Hal Finney's frozen brain, in the prison records of Paul LaRue, or maybe in the Bitcoin blockchain, hidden in transaction patterns visible only to those who know what to look for. But while LaRue sits in jail, while Finney awaits resurrection in a cryo chamber. While 1,000,000 bitcoins haven't moved, we can only guess. And maybe that's exactly what the creator wanted, to keep us guessing, for us to argue. So we'd never know the truth for sure, because Bitcoin isn't about a person, it's about an idea. The idea that money can exist without governments, that maths is stronger than violence, that code is stronger than laws, and that idea will live on, regardless of who created it. An inmate in an American prison, a frozen body in Arizona, or a ghost that never existed.